Welcome back to the Meridian Pursuit Builders Podcast. Today we spend time with Chuck Foushee out of Kentucky. From EMT captain to one of Hardin County's go-to custom builders, Chuck Foushee has watched the industry change while keeping standards high. He shares how trimming houses on off days opened the door to a 35-year building career. We'll cover the 3 client types he sorts on day 1, the marriage mindset that keeps projects and relationships on track, airtight change orders, realistic allowances that prevent budget surprises, and a draw schedule that builds trust from the first dig to the final check. If you want fewer surprises, stronger systems, and happier clients, this episode is for you. Let's get to it. Well, Chuck, let's go ahead and get started. Go ahead and give me your backstory, how you got into building, and kind of give me your origin story.
Okay. Well, I've always dabbled a little bit in building. I always enjoyed, or woodworking, I'll say, more so than building. But when I was in high school, I actually took shop. I think they should bring that back. I built a cedar chest, I think my senior year. I enjoyed every aspect of it through that process. And then at that time, I became an EMT, and then later on became a paramedic. And I worked for the city of Louisville for umpteen years. So then I built my first house, which helped in-laws building their house. I think I built my first house at 19. Had to borrow $36,000. Payment was around $280 a month. Didn't have a clue how I was going to make my payment. And interest rate was 18%. So on my off days, I would went and trimmed houses. So I did learn the intricate way, the old ways, this, that. I can remember back, there was no nail guns. There was nothing of that nature. And a lot of times everybody wanted just regular trim, and then they would just put a sealer over it. So as far as oil, nails, dirty hands. So I remember there was a bottle of baby powder sitting beside the saw, and you would always put baby powder on your hands so you wouldn't get the trim dirty as it went in. You're nailing nails and getting the oil off the nails. So it's evolved immensely from that stage. And then I built my second home. And then my brother wanted a home, and then his friend wanted a home. So it was just one of these. I guess they saw what, I was able to do. So then, lo and behold, one night, a friend, I'm going to say a friend, acquaintance, they wanted this big old house done. And I did my best trying to figure things and so forth. And this was the day before cell phone. So that tells you how far back it was. Met at their house. We went over it, and they go, "Oh, that's just too much. That's more than we want to spend." Well, I was literally relieved because that house made me very nervous. And then by the time I drove home, walked in the door, the phone was ringing. They go, "We decided to build it." So that was my first great big house that I built. And then it just seems like that was my forte. Most people started just calling me for that, for bigger homes. We would build all sizes. So I formulated a company. I ended up going ahead and leaving Madison, Louisville. That was a big jump from that guaranteed paycheck, which most builders, that's where they do start. So one led to the other, and then we were mainly building in the Meade County area. I looked at what a lot of other contractors were doing and looking at the mistakes and tried to do it a very professional way, because I was taught that through EMS. As far as I was a captain or a supervisor there, so I had about 109 employees under me. So I knew how to handle employees. I knew how to look at contracts, because before I think that's the only reason they promoted me was because I was in the EMS union, and they didn't like the way that my I's were dotted and T's were crossed and stuff. So that's basically what I took into the concept of building, and been very fortunate. I got a call from a doctor to build a house in Elizabethtown. We got that contract. So that's how I came from the Meade County area to the Hardin County area. And then once we were doing that, before we got out of that subdivision, we had built 15 houses in there, 4 or 5,000 square foot range. And it was kind of developed at that point. Got an office, I got a secretary. I think I had 21 employees, 2 framing crews, full-time trim crew, cleanup crew, superintendent. But I did learn one thing: bigger is not always better. Because also the headaches come into play with that. So I guess it's around '09, 2008, kind of housing went down, 9/11 hit. And I learned that people with money that want to build a house, when their money's not making the money, they're not going to build. So it was kind of a trying time through that period. But we've always been fortunate. Never built a spec house in my life. Always had contract houses, and most of them were always cost plus houses. Being very fair with those. But that's kind of where it got started. Was, I'd say, moonlighting or on the side, and it just grew into a very lucrative business.
Man, from EMS supervisor to one of Hardin County's most premier custom builders, that is quite the story.
Every time I ever thought about building a spec house, we always got work. And then when I say I've never built a spec house, after 35 years in this business, I'm building my first spec house at this point. And the only reason I'm doing it is my youngest son he wants a house built. So I thought, well, heck, while I'm doing it, they're smaller homes. I'm thinking, well, I'll just try it. I'll dabble in it. The lot was nice. It was right beside it. So in about 6 months, I'll tell you how I like spec building. That's kind of the start. I think this podcast is basically towards younger builders with that and older builders. And I've got a lot of young builders that call me continuously. And I can tell you that this business will humble you in a lot of ways. You're probably never going to get rich, but you can make a very nice living for yourself.
Well, I think that's a good point, because I feel like younger builders now, there's so much social media out there that makes it seem like, hey, in 10 easy steps, you can build this home. And then the after shots just make it look like a magazine home. And it's like, man, that just seems super simple. And they'll even call it out. They'll say it was, $20,000 for the foundation and this much for the framing. And then, 10 steps later, we have this beautiful home, and, look how easy that was. And that's not really reality all the time. And if you're building for someone else, then, you also have that client relationship that has to be finessed and worked with, and set proper expectations so that during the build, that client has a really good experience all the way up until closing.
Well, I describe it in this fashion. For example, when you say easy steps, this is that if you don't know the true process of building and there becomes an issue in the foundation, that maybe the blueprint wasn't exactly right, or can we do it this way? How's that foundation issue going to affect that roof? And because it all grows itself out. So without experience, you're not going to know how that's going to affect that aspect of the home. So that makes it really interesting as far as people going out and say, well, this is easy. Anybody can do that. Gone through different time, placements, and so forth, to whereas you have homeowners deciding to build their own home. They think, well, all I got to do is schedule contractors. So they get into it. So they end up having to depend solely on the subcontractor to do this, that, as far as laying it out, as far as this aspect. And normally, if you don't choose a good one, they're going to go to the road of that's the easiest way. So you're not really sure what you're going to end up with. Now, with myself, I've always passed on discounts. So I think a homeowner hiring a contractor is probably the best investment they have, because half of what I do, they're going to save with my discounts, the knowledge, stuff of this nature. But when I get a client, I guess that's where we're headed into, how to handle clients.
I'm sure you have never had an issue that you had to work through or anything like that. I'm sure
Oh,
it was
never.
easy breezy from
Right.
start to the end.
Let's see. Today's Monday. I haven't had anything yet. Okay. But there'll be something each day. You have to understand that when you're building someone a home, they're going to pay for that for almost the rest of their life. That's the biggest investment that they have. They have to trust you in what you do. Now, as a contractor, I have to learn people. So, for example, is if your first meeting and you're setting with them, that the personality of that couple, maybe one of them, maybe one wants to build, but the other one really doesn't, stuff of that. And it's just little things that's going to make this build difficult. But they have to be well informed when they come in as far as what the process is, what they're going to do, what's expected. But I always told people that I determine clients in three categories. There's the particulars, which I can very well handle that. There's the fanatics, and I can actually handle that. But when my gut tells me they're going to be an idiot, there's not enough money to be made on that job to put yourself through that stress and process.
How do you qualify those people? Is that that within the first couple minutes of talking to these people?
Usually when they call and you have because usually we'll have about an hour and a half meeting if they don't have a print, and we'll go through the processes, the stages, and you can pretty much tell how much homework they've done towards building this home. And you ask the question, have you ever built before? If they built before, it's either a nightmare or it went great or stuff of this nature. So I always look at it as a marriage. Okay. When we're sitting at the table and we're discussing, and I'm trying to, get them to like me to do this and so forth. That's our, flirting stage, and we just got engaged. All right. We start this build. It's like a marriage. We just got married. So we got to get through these processes of marriage, and it's all the honeymoon phase through, getting started. But when you get towards the end, things can get real interesting at times. And then hopefully what we try to do by the time we're done is we're not divorced. So it's building is a whole lot like a marriage in that respect. You got to respect for both parties, with that aspect. So I always tell homeowners, I said, here today at this table, I could probably convince you that I'm the greatest builder that ever walked on 2 feet, that I build the best homes, and maybe even convince you that I'm 10 feet tall. Who knows? But the best way for a homeowner to choose a contractor is you can have the fanciest ads, you can have the best logos, the best trucks, but the best way for a homeowner to choose a contractor is to talk to people that they built for. So we give them a complete company profile. We give them everybody that we've ever built for, and we encourage them to build them. Now, as long as I've been in this, 99% of my stuff comes from word of mouth. Now, a lot of them will say, well, we don't know if we can afford you. So I don't know because all I've ever really gotten to do is bigger homes. And I said, I don't charge a penny more than anybody else. It's the same percentage ratio. They don't buy lumber any less than I do. Now I'm going to use number one A grade material. They don't buy concrete any less than I do. So I said, but I'm going to give you a realistic price. If I'm going to scare you on a price, I'm going to do it sitting here at this table, not in the middle to the end of the bill. So with that, usually we can keep a contract within 3 to 5% of the original estimate, but we give them a realistic price. For example, I'll take 3 homes that I've built and that's equivalent to what they're wanting to build, and I'll do averages on allowances. And then that's what I will utilize. So if they're in that average range for those type, because there are extravagant out there, and there's no end to what you can put in a home these days. So with that, we've got a realistic price going in. So when they go to select their cabinets, they've got a good budget. They don't. It's not one of these that they say, "Well, he only gave me 15,000 for cabinets, and my cabinets are 80,000, and we're already having an issue." Now, there are builders that out there that will price a house lower in order to get the contract, and then if you're in the middle, there's a problem. Now, the way I look at it is if they don't have the money at the beginning, they're not going to have the money at the end. So that's why we have great rapport with bank is we give them a realistic number. Now, banks will tell you, for example, they're not in the building business, so they're not going to sit there and say they recommend this builder, this builder, this builder, unless you ask them. So once you ask them, they may recommend a builder. The same way I am. I'm not in the banking business, so I don't recommend banks. But if they ask me, I'll tell them who we've had the best success with. But we're very detailed in what we do. And we use this is one of the most important things that a young builder can learn change orders. Okay. I have not built a house in 35 years that we didn't make changes on. Some of them cost more money, some cost less, some don't charge anything. But if it changes the wording of the dynamics of that blueprint, use a job change order. Okay. So we use a blueprint. They bring us the blueprint. We sit here, we walk through the front door and we go through every room. I say, what do you want here? What do you want here? They don't really know sometimes, so you make suggestions. You continue through the process. That's jotted down on that blueprint. We go outside the house, go to every elevation, talk about everything that they want. So when I give them an estimate on their home, that is the home they've described to me that they want.
And you pretty much know when they're describing the type of kitchen and the type of range and, kind of the level of quality that they're wanting in the home, you have a pretty good sense of what that costs. Since things do change, as far as the type of finishes that you can have on a house, how are you keeping up with, here's a trendy kitchen design that, people are asking more for than another design. How are you kind of keeping track of some of those newer products or newer type of finishes that people want?
Well, the younger builders and different ones now, everything is either social media, Facebook, TikTok, this. So I've had to evolve into looking at those things. But I tell customers, I said, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So when we sit and we have our initial, I'll tell them, I said, start building a portfolio. If you see a picture of what you want, take, or on social media, take that picture, put it in that portfolio, forward it to me, and then I'm going to research exactly what they're looking for. Now, we've been very fortunate that a lot of the clients, they bring us information. So when I have new clients, I know exactly what they're speaking of and we're good to go. But on the average of homes that we've done that's how I set their allowances for these specifics as far as cabinetry, floor coverings. But these change orders is what I'm meaning is what it does is I'm a builder that my contract's 11 pages long. It tells us what we're going to do with the dirt that we dig out of the basement. What we're going to if this takes place, we hit rock, we hit unsuitable soil condition. So there are variables in that contract. And then my estimate sheet is like 6 pages long. It's all lined item. I'm the type that I do not like even numbers. So if it's $11,416 is what it came out estimate, that's what goes on the estimate. I don't round it either way. So extremely transparent. They see every number that I have. So with that said, that, we sign a contract, we get started. I've always been the type of contractor, I want no money up front. I want to make sure that you see what I'm doing, that I'm doing work before I receive any payment from you. So we always dig the basement, buy all the permitting, put the basement in, and as soon as the basement in, that's when I get the first draw from them.
Wow.
the way we do it is it's all itemized based on their estimate sheet for each line item is categorized according to that. So they can run their own spreadsheet through the process of this building. So we get to that on the 5th day of every month, I send them an itemized statement. They have 3 days to review that itemized statement. If they have any questions, they contact me. That is sent to the bank. On the 10th day, I expect a check. If I don't get a check, then all construction ceases. Because if I've never been beat out of any money, but if I am, I'm only going to be beat out of 1 month worth. So that's never happened. Always had good clients.
Well, it sounds like, too, you set a really good precedent, too, of just establishing trust with these clients really early on. And even the saying that, I'm not even going to take your money until you're seeing some progress. I mean, what a testament to your character to even pitch something like that.
It's just the way that, you use common sense. Just think of your own personal life. Somebody comes up and say, well, I want to do all this work, but I want 50% of my money before we get started. It tells me several things. One, they're not very divested as far as they don't have the capital to actually go out and buy this material to get started, stuff of that, with that. And I don't like that aspect on things. Now, I have some suppliers that are new. When they come in, they'll say, well, we'll need 50%, when we start this. Well, they're still going to wait until the 10th of that following month, because that's the way I have it worked out with the bank. And then if they, at that time, if the bank's okay with going ahead and doing that, and my customer is okay with doing that, then we will give them that 50%. If not, they're not going to be a supplier of ours. I don't like when a sub comes in and they say, I say, well, how much do you think this is going to be on this? And they go, oh, I think it'll be $10,000. Well, like I said, I hate even numbers. They gave no thought whatsoever. They're just throwing a number. And I said, well, okay, how about $1,518? Well, I said, when you figure this out, you come back to me and we'll go. Now, I'm extremely loyal to my subs and suppliers. Okay. I have a supplier sheet that's got listed. Well, first of all, there's a form that the customer gets called stages of building. So they know exactly what comes next and they're handed that. Then they get a supplier sheet that is name, address, contact person, who we recommend. And it's not just one. Like, they may have a personality conflict. They can go to different ones, but when they go to those, they know exactly what I want, how I expect it. So I use the same subs. If I built a house that was 1,500 square foot, or I built one that was 15,000 square feet, I'm using the same subs.
Wow.
Same suppliers.
How important are those subcontractors? Could you talk a little bit about that? You said you're extremely loyal. How important is that for a builder?
It is. I mean, to me, it's like a brotherhood bond. You have to have that with them. For example, I'm not going to, when I get a contract, I'm not going to go out and get 5 different bids from different subs and use the cheapest. Okay. I've never done that. Not going to do that. Now, I don't look for other subs or other suppliers. So here's what I'm saying with subs. I use a subcontractor agreement form. Okay. And on that form, it tells me that they're going to carry general liability. I'm going to be named as co-insured. They are going to pay unemployment on their employees. They're going to withhold from their employees, even their automobile insurance. Okay. I have that agreement form signed with each and every sub. So when they get ready to do a house, there's another form that's an addendum to that states what we're going to do this house for. Okay. So we know up front, they know that I'm fair. I have a lot of subcontractors never send me a bill. They always know that my estimates are where we need to be. And if they're not, then in turn, we sit and we look through why we didn't come up to the same number. What I found with subcontractors they're great craftsmen. Some of them are artists, horrible businessmen. They're horrible businessmen with that aspect. So now, when I have a sub that comes on by using the same ones, they know exactly what I expect. So I don't have to micromanage them on every job when they come in. On framing, they know I want a double stud jack system. They know I want California corners and tees. They know that any LVLs, if it's a 3-ply, I want 3 2x4s underneath. They know I want blocking between every. They know that I want the crowns checked on all the material. The plumbers, when they come in, they know I want it neat. The electricians know I want it neat. They know when they start putting covers on the switches and the plugs that they better have a torpedo level and make sure that they're level and every screw slot is straight up and down. So that's where by using the same subs, they know what you expect. So it's not like a micromanaging every day.
Yeah, it sounds like it's a compounding quality too that happens every single build.
Yeah. And then, I hate callbacks because it feels like we didn't do something right. And I know we did. So when we have to go back on a callback, which they're going to take place, is that it really frustrates me because I'm not really sure how to fix it because I know we did it right the first time. But with the callbacks, we have that worked out with the homeowners. They contact me. We have a form we fill out what the issue is. We don't wait. We get on it. We bring the sub over. We take care of it, stuff of that with that aspect. And then at the end of the year with the subs, we do an end of the year callback review. Yes, at the end of the year, what it is I have the homeowners make me a list of everything that they have questions on. Now, all through the year, we're going back if they call for any reason. But at the end of the year, as far as cosmetic goes, that I'll say, well, make a list of things. And then in turn, what I'll do is I'll meet with them and I ask them, I said, look, do you mind if I go through the entire house to see how the house has performed over the years? Because I'm going to see things they won't see. And then I'll add that to the list. So once that list is compiled, then I come back to the office. I break it down by subcontractors and suppliers, and then we schedule a date. If it's any drywall issues, then of course I do the drywallers first, and then I'll bring everybody in at once that we can. I said, all right, here's your copy of the paper. These are the things we need you to address. And I hand it out to each one of them. They go address those issues. They sign off on it that it's been completed, or if they need to order a part or they need to do this. So we keep that list and we keep following up until that list is completed. And usually it's about 2 weeks. Then
Wow.
I meet with the homeowner again and I say, is everything to your satisfaction? Because this does end your warranty based on cosmetics. Now, if 3 years down the road, they want us to come, they call, and I have that continue. I had a doctor one time that wouldn't mow his yard unless I drove by and looked at it. So we have that kind of rapport, and I tell customers, I said, look, anything you need on this house, you call me because nobody knows this house better than I know this house. So that's kind of how we handle the callback issues and the problem if we have any, with that aspect. And my
Wow.
subs are fantastic about it. I tell subs that there's 3 things to a happy customer. Okay. When they wake up in the morning, they have plenty of hot water. Okay. Their roof could be leaking, but they'll have more of a fit if they wake up and they don't have any hot water. In the summertime, they want to be cool. If they're not happy. In the wintertime, they want to be warm. So those 3 aspects we pay a lot of attention to because it seems like with a customer, everything else will work its way out. But you do those 3 things or they have to spend a a weekend without any air conditioning, they're not real receptive when you get there on Monday. So a lot of my subs will go ahead and take care of those things. But I do tell people when I build for them that they're hiring me to protect their interest. Okay, I work for them. I don't work for the sub. I don't work for the supplier. I work for that homeowner, and I take that to heart to protect their interest. And I think I do a pretty good job of that.
Wow. Well, what are some? I mean, it sounds like you have crafted a pretty amazing process to eliminate some issues before they even come up. What have been some of the challenges that have stuck out to you that have forced you to create a process to fix that so that it didn't happen again?
Okay, well, drywall is a builder's worst nightmare. Okay, not a perfected art. So, for example, is that if you can hang drywall, but when you start finishing that drywall, of course, you can't have your you need either your heat on or your air conditioning on. You need to acclimate that house. We use humidistats. It measures relative humidity in the house. And we put them in various rooms. And if that house has got too much moisture in it, then stuff's going to, expand. So, like on drywall, when we put the drywall in, we're going to have the heat on, or we're going to have the air conditioning on. If we can, we do not hook up the return air, and we put HVAC filters over the return air vents areas in the house. We don't hook the return up, and we put vents over top of that to keep the dust and stuff out of it. That has been one of the best salvations. The second thing is common sense. All right. Drywall, we use screws. Okay. They use some nails, but mainly screws. Well, those screws, they come in a box. They got slick heads and they got oil on them, keep them from rusting. So common sense tells you drywall mud is not going to stick to a nail head or a screw head if it's slick and it's got oil on it. So a friend of mine, he works and supplies products, for Home Depot, Lowe's, this. So I was talking to him one day. So he comes up and he shows me, sends me 3 boxes of them, and he says, "Well, try this." It's a Teflon screw, and it's got a rigid head on it, and we've used it now for about 4 or 5 years, and it has knocked our drywall issue down tremendously.
Wow.
Okay, so that was an issue. A lot of things that builders are just stupid about the way they do it is you got to get water away from the house. All right. So when I put a foundation in, I will not dig a footer, except on like a walkout area for the freeze. Every footer we put in is formed. Okay, it's 12 inches, it's 2 foot wide, and we put a corrugated sleeve pipe on the outside, and we put either 57 or number 9 gravel. But when we back it up and we put one on the inside, all the way around the inside of the basement, we'll take it to a sunk rock. Put up, 12 inches of gravel on top of that, and then, pour the floor. Then once we'll put up to 3 or 4 feet of gravel all the way around the house to get that water away from the basement. That helps with, any water is going to go to the point of least resistance. So if you've got that much, because a lot of times they don't put the pipe, they got about 4 inches of gravel in there, and you get that musty smell, you get heaving of the floors, you get this, you get that. So that has solved any issues we have in that. And knock on wood, I've never had a leaky basement. And then on downspouts, used to people would put splash blocks on, they would have the elbows. We pipe every downspout drain away from the house with PVC pipe. We don't use corrugated pipe because it's going to stop us. So we pipe everything away with PVC pipe. These big old roofs that we do, some 14, 12, 12, 12 pitch roofs, that water is coming off that roof fast.
Yeah.
So we don't use the standard gutters. They're all 6-inch gutters, 5-inch downspouts that's piped away from the house. I put a sump crock in every house, whether it needs it or it doesn't. If it's a walkout, we free flow it, but we still have that sump crock because you never know. And what a lot of people don't understand that an HVAC system will produce up to 15 gallons of water a day, and that water's got to go somewhere. So we usually send that to the sump crock.
Wow.
I hate headaches, and I have studied this.
It sounds like you have, to eliminate those headaches, I mean, you have put a lot of thought into how can I eliminate this for good? You know, I don't want a Band-Aid to put on this. I want this to be done, and let's figure it out, even as tiny as a screw head. I mean, who would think that unless you're in it day to day and you're seeing that this is a real issue and it's causing, 3 or 4 different issues down the road when it comes down to just a little bit of oil on a screw. How can we fix that? Always be, even the mindset, I'm sure that's kind of your unique position in the market too, is just that, it's not doing just all of the right things and building some consistency, but it's being proactive too, to saying, hey, I don't want to be at the same place that I was 35 years ago. I want to evolve with it, and I want my newest home to be way better than what my first one was, but that has to come with a mindset of continual growth for every single build.
It does. And, we've got this down to such a process now that, when it takes, like, for example, unless it's in a tight area subdivision, I like to stake out my own basements. I like the time. I like to shoot my own elevations. So I've got a vision of how that house is going to be. If there's a problem on the foundation, then I know about it. And then some subdivisions, they require an engineer to do, which even then we go stake them, and then I tell him to go out there and shoot my stakes. Okay. It's just little things I won't give on. I guess this is bad to say with it is I like to use A-grade material. All right. I think that the cost outweighs a lot of the problems that come down. For example, with 2x4s, there's been, they've tried different things with 2x4s throughout the years. With that in mind, that if you look, because like some of these houses are tall and the hallways are long, and you look down that hallway and that hallway waves back at you after the drywall, I mean, that's just not acceptable. So with A grade, and a lot of people don't understand that a 2x4 has a crown in it also. So I've actually told the framers that when they go through a 2x4 pile, I want them to look at that 2x4, and if it doesn't look good, call it. Put an X on it, throw it over. I'll send it back. We'll order more 2x4s. Same way with anything that goes into it, because that's where it all starts. When the framers start on the foundation, we shoot around, hoping that the foundation guy got everything level, but if he didn't, then that means it's going to show up in the floor system. So we shoot it. If that's the case, I always use a treated plate on the concrete, and then we'll double plate on top of that, and then we'll put wedges in between those double plates to get the floor back where it needs to be all the way throughout the house. Every builder has to build according to code, but if you really look at it, that code is the minimum. That's the minimum standard that you have to build by. So if you're a contractor and you're building only to the code, you're not building much. I know that there's one clause in there that says that you can have a 1/2 inch deflection in 4 feet in the floor. Well, that'll trip somebody. So they're all, it's minimum. Another stupid one is that you have to have an exhaust fan in the bathroom unless you have a window. Well, who is going to open that window when it's 25 degrees outside? And then the other aspect on those exhaust fans, if you're only using the ones that are 45 CFM, all you're doing is making noise.
Yep.
You got to use a higher CFM. We've got to do some neat things. We had a couple one time that their in-laws were moving in. They had a cat. The husband was definitely allergic to cats. So we put what they called a sick house syndrome system in the house where it exchanges the air every 4 hours. So I've got to do a lot of neat things. I don't know how many elevators I've put in. They're really interesting, but people have given me the opportunity to do some real interesting things. And I don't like the mainstream everyday stuff. When they bring me something difficult that we haven't done, then that's when I get really interested in doing it.
Well, Chuck, let's transition a little bit. Well, actually, before we do, I wanted to let you know my job as a kid was looking at those 2x4s, and we had to set up a pile. And all of or we called them, if it had a dog leg in it, is what my dad used to call it.
Yes.
It's got a dog leg, put it over here in this pile. But if it wasn't too bad, then that dog leg pile is what we used for the T's and the corners. So then we had to straighten the lumber ourselves, nail by nail, as we're going through it to actually make it straight. And that was in its own pile. And if it was too bad for that, then Don's Lumber usually came and picked it up, and they would replace the lumber.
Well, here's the way I looked at that aspect, and your dad did good on that. I paid the same amount of money for both of those, so I want the good one. They can have this. So they will do that, and then the framers kept saying, well, we'll use that for blocking. I said, no, use those 14 and 16 foot because of the cost. 2x4 is too much. I'll send that back home.
Yep.
You mentioned Don's Lumber. That was a fine man. Don Parsons is a fine man. Out of all the builders that he dealt with in his career, I was fortunate enough to be the one he selected to build his personal home.
Really?
So that was I feel like that was a good tribute.
I would say so. Well, let's transition to a little bit of the marketing side of the business. I first would like to hear about your logo, because that is quite the logo on your shirt. I'd like to hear how that came about.
Well, in essence, when I first started, I wanted something that kind of set away, different from what most people. So I knew that the colors, fuchsia and green, would jump out at different aspects. So, if you're from this area and you remember Brandenburg, the Meade County Fair, a lot of people knew me, but they didn't know what I was doing. So I remember one year at the fair, I had a bunch of T-shirts made and a bunch of hats, and I packed them all around the fair that year, handed them out to anybody who wanted one. So, so you saw my hats and shirts all over Meade County at the time. But I had a guy design it, and I've used it 35 years now.
I hear this a lot, is, word of mouth is everything. And especially if you've been in the business 30 plus years, word of mouth is where it was at, because you would complete a home and someone would be in the market for a home and they're going to ask their peers. Today is a little bit different because there is so much social media. People who are in the market for a new home, they have so many ideas that they almost need a guide to say what is realistic, what your budget can be. It's more than just, I'm going to take your idea and bring it to life, because the idea that they bring may not even be a realistic idea, and it may not even be a real home that they show you. It could be a AI generated image that's not even real. What we're trying to do on a marketing side is we're trying to bridge this gap, and we're trying to show how to carry that reputation on, but let it match online. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to mirror the real life in-person reputation and match that online. So if someone can do their research and they come to you and say, hey, we already know your backstory, and we see social proof, and we see reviews and all of that. And then once they start uncovering more, then they already have so much more information about the builder that it makes that whole process easier, because you've already established trust. We've formulated a method that starts with websites and uses social media and uses reviews. It creates this good system so that over the years there is kind of this evolving engine, so that when someone new does come to the market, it's not like, hey, this company looks brand new, but they've been in business for 35 years. But why do they only have 3 reviews on Google, and their website may be out of date? So we're trying to combine those and show that if this company's been around for 30 plus years, then their online presence really shows that legacy.
I think That's a very good question because I've asked that numerous times myself. 99.9% of my homes come from recommendations, word of mouth. I have a website. It is definitely out of date. Outdated. The big issue I have is I'm 67 years old. Thought seriously about retiring. And then last year I was injured and had to sit for 10 months. I'm thinking, there's no way I can do this. I still really, really, really enjoy this business. When you first dig that basement and the smell of that fresh dirt and the whole process, I really enjoy it. So as long as I continue to enjoy that, I'm going to continue to do it. I've been very fortunate. I've had people wait a year or two on us till we had an open schedule. But that's not the way that it's going to build a reputation. So, what you're talking about for young builders, there needs to be something. You have to look at your own mindset. If you want to know about something, what do? You Google it. Mm-hmm. So, if they want a builder, that's how they're going to need to do it. They can Google it, they can look. I know here a lot of people will contact the Home Builder Association and they'll have a list of registered builders. I've always told young builders that building a reputation is easy. I mean, it's extremely easy. All you got to do is do what you say you're going to do, build good quality, and do it. Now, keeping that reputation is a nightmare, okay? Because you have to continue. Now, youngest son worked for me since he was 12. Pretty much all the sons have, but they've gotten every nasty, demeaning job there is on the job site. So they have really no desire for this business. If you're going to do this, you've got to have a burning desire that you want to do this because there's so many ups, downs, stress with that, the economy, it just becomes an issue with that. So I'm in that point right now. What do I do with this reputation? What do I do with this long history? Because in theory, all I've got to sell is my name. We've got equipment, we've got this, we've got that. And I've talked to a couple of younger builders, and they could start out at 80%, whereas they would be at 10%. But if I'm going to sell my name or relinquish it, they're going to do things the way or teach them to do that. I've had a lot of young builders contact me. I am really willing and able to tell them my opinion, to pass. I'll give you little things. I remember early in my career, I was estimating the house and I forgot the drywall. So I had to eat it. I had to eat all the drywall in that house. Do you think I ever forgot that drywall again? No. I've learned in this business, if it costs you money, then you'll never forget it. The biggest thing I see with a lot of builders and where they get themselves in trouble, when you're out here, you're doing the house, and you're getting these draws in, and we're looking at $400,000 or $500,000 a month that we're having to go. So when a builder sees, well, I got all this money in my account, I'm gonna go buy a new truck. Okay, you don't know if you've made a dime on that house until it's done. So the way I do it, the best thing to tell on where young builders is establish yourself a paycheck, whatever you think you need to keep the household running through that process. And then that's what you pay yourself. When the project's done, then you see that you've made, then you can go out and buy your big ticket items, because that's where a lot of builders will get themselves in trouble. Now, I've been fooled by builders. I've seen builders come in that have been strong competition, and I'm thinking, well, they make me look like a thief at their price. And then they're out buying airplanes, they're out buying this, buying that. And then it's not long that they're bankrupt. Had a young builder one time, had 5 superintendents all rolled in one day in a brand new truck. They were getting every contract that there was out there. And I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong here? Wasn't long they were bankrupt. So that's a good advice, to pay yourself. I truly believe in being a subchapter S corporation. You can pay yourself dividends. You can, a good accountant. But back to the marketing aspect, through the Home Builders Association, we've got a website. We've got really nice company yard signs that when people go by, they see a house. But we build a lot of homes in remote areas to where nobody ever sees them. But I always notice that those yard signs, when they're in a development, you're going to get more calls.
Okay.
For example, kids' sports events, you're going to get inundated with that. Sponsoring. I've always felt that I needed to support school projects. I always do that. But a funny story, for 5 years, I had a sign in an outfield at a baseball field, had my logo, everything on it. And I noticed out there and I looked at it and I noticed that the phone number was wrong the very first year.
No.
So I'm sitting there thinking, do I want them to change that or do I want to leave it? I was watching the baseball game and I'm thinking, somebody looks out there and they see that sign, they're not going to be calling me for a house. Okay. They're going to be calling me for another sponsorship and another sponsorship. So for 5 years on that sign, my phone number was wrong and I never said a word about changing it. So you have to kind of pick your marketing, how you want to do that. But that's one thing that I'm not knowledgeable. It would have to be a company as yours. But I have seen other builders with Facebook, these ads, and the younger customers that I'm getting right now, that's where they're getting all their information they're bringing to me. So it's imperative as a new builder starting out, that's what you've got to look towards.
Video is probably the easiest way to do that. And even in our discussion here is you saying that how you you started out in trim, you have this attention to detail. Being able to communicate all of that is so hard. And if you're trying to do that through contracts and documents, and I'm a very visual person, and we're actually building a house right now in Ocala, Florida. And the process that they have taken us through has been very visual. If I'm going to hire a custom builder, I want to know what makes you different than somebody else. Because if you're in that position, you're not really price shopping. That's not really that type of person. Like you said, everyone's going to be roughly around the same price if they actually know what they're getting. If you're asking this person for a level 1 house and this person for a level 3, yeah, the price is going to be different. But overall, everyone's going to be somewhat competitive with each other. So then what makes working with Chuck different than working with somebody else? And the way to communicate that is so much faster if you do it through video of like, hey, this is where my mindset's at as we're actually going into the build. And, I'm not asking for $1 until we're breaking ground. Little things like that just get lost so easily. But if you can craft that in a brand video that kind of establishes who you are and why you're doing it, it's easier for people to resonate with you and actually say, okay, this person's actually more like, I think they fit me better. Because also, I'm sure you have turned away work because it wasn't a good fit. And like you said, this is a marriage. Some of that can be a bit of a qualifier too, is just to say like, hey, here's who I am, this is how I think, so that the time that we're actually have a first set down meeting, or the first time you give me a call, then you're already fully aware of kind of our process, our legacy, the type of homes we build, the things that we look at. They have, especially this younger generation, as they have so much knowledge. So now they know if they're bringing ideas to the table, they already know where you're standing, and they're not having to chat for, 4 hours to try to extract everything from you. So it kind of makes that buyer process a whole lot faster and efficient. And it also establishes trust because they learn things that, you're going to probably forget to even say, but be like, Chuck, I didn't know that you worked at EMS. And, it's like, oh yeah, I don't normally tell my whole story to my client that comes in, but now they have a kind of a new respect for you. So we have found that video works really well for that, just to communicate those things that are a little bit harder to put on paper.
I fully agree because, I think we're as a society, we're going to become paperless eventually. And, I'm an old dinosaur, is that I'm a paperwork fiend. I like to see it written down. But just what you said is stuff that's been going through my mind because a lot of my clientele, when they come in here, I'm looking at them, they're babies. I'm thinking, do you really want to put yourself in this kind of debt for the rest of your life? But, if you think about it, we all did it as well. Another interesting thing is, just finished a house for a second generation. I remember she was 3 years old when we built her mom and dad's. So these things are when they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, this old dog needs to learn because sometimes with the younger generation, I'm not used to the way they think. I still think, what I've done, but a lot of them, they don't want the big yard anymore. They don't want the big house. They don't want this. They want minimal to take care of. And there's still some out there. Um, the biggest thing that I guess with young builders or anybody is you got one shot. I'd say in my with my clientele, you got one shot. You better make sure it's right because it's first shot. Because some of the houses that they're building is they're never going to build another one. This is their forever dream home. And if I always ask people, I said, is this your final home? Is this the house that you're going to be carried out feet first in? And they usually say yes, no. So with that aspect, you want to build in quality, windows, floor coverings to where, you're not replacing in 10 years. If you're going to sell the house in 10 years, then you need to stay marketable. So those are the things. But with some of the younger ones, they bring up things that I got to learn about as far as communicating with them to this. I like talking to people. They like to text. Okay. They like emails. They like text. That's their communication. Some of them don't even have good communication skills. And that makes it harder that I've got to make sure either visually, like you're saying, or through sending them examples that they understand what I'm saying because they don't want to talk. They don't have time to talk. It's a text or it's this or that.
100%. I'm not like that, but I do know a lot of people that are like that. I'd rather you pick up the phone and call me.
Yes. We can get it done so much faster.
Yes, for sure.
I guess it's been 10 plus years, but there was a point that I just flat refused to text. If you can't call me, if you got time to text, you got time to call. And then I got to thinking, well, nobody would ever call me. So I had to start texting or I would never get the subs and stuff to get what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying it's in a paranoid state, but there again is, like when I text and I get an answer that, yes, this is what I want or this or that, then I'm taking a picture of that text and I'm printing it and I'm putting it in the file because this is what they want.
Yeah.
That's where I am about I's dotted, T's crossed and paperwork.
Well, there is nothing wrong with that at all. Well, Chuck, as we're wrapping up here, what are some of the most key relationships that a builder should have? A banker, builder association, subcontractors. What are some of if they're starting out or they've been in business for a few years, who should they prioritize to kind of establish their home building business?
Well, if you're going to be in the spectrum markets, you definitely got to establish first with the banks. Now, I'm not that familiar, and I'm not going to sit here and make it state that I am. Now, I have a very good rapport with banks because the clients that go through there, and we're talking about a lot of money that comes through, and I have to, I need that money from the bank. So you have to establish with the bank. The other thing is that I think one where they forget a lot is they need to be well in touch with their account, what they can do, what they can't do. To me, the Home Builder Association is very good. I've been a member, been a registered builder, been forever, it seems like. But with that is it's a good networking. You get to actually meet. I can remember years ago there was no cell phones, and when you got home is when you had to talk to whoever if they answered the phone, if they were talking to somebody. So it was a long drawn out process. Whereas now you got, and no builder would ever walk on another builder's job site. That wasn't what happened years ago. Now, you welcome them on there and with young, but I think that Home Builder Association is a plus. And if you want to advance, and it's not an ego thing, but become a registered builder because you want to stand out amongst the others. And there's a lot of interesting things there. Plus, the Home Builder Association, they offer a lot of continuing education that you can learn. There's a lot of legislation that's going to come down that's going to affect you that Home Builder Associations have a lot to do with in those respects. So if you're out here and you're trying to do your own thing, but if you're not informed, you definitely need that. The other thing is, of course, you got to establish some kind of rapport with the insurance companies because you got to have workman's comp, builder's risk. You got to have liability insurance. You got to have this insurance, and make sure that you're well insured. As far as I've always said, if I didn't have to pay insurance and taxes, I could really make a lot of money. It's if you're going to be a business, function as a business. Earlier, I said, that's the hardest thing I've seen with subcontractors. They're great craftsmen. Some of them are even artists, but they're horrible businessmen, and I try to teach a lot of that. A lot of them, they got to have their workman's comp. And the thing is, they don't get a check from me until I get that new form. And so they're running with it. But, we get audited. And if it's not there, and, lo and behold, say that it's elapsed and one of them gets hurt, it's falling back on your insurance. Because the insurance company use a ladder effect. They keep going up that ladder. They find who's got the most money. Yeah. And then that's what they're going after.
Well, Chuck, how can people learn more about you, get connected with you?
I have a website. Like I said, it needs to definitely be updated, but I'm kind of on that downhill slide of my career unless someone, that I decided to turn it over to or to work with of this nature. But I do have a website, and then, of course, the phone numbers, 270-765-9949, which, believe it or not, I told you I'm not a good delegator. That actually rings over to my cell phone, so you're going to get me. Now, like through this interview here is I haven't been taking phone calls when I'm meeting. Very courteous. I turn my phone off. But whenever I'm very good, and that's one thing to always with anybody, return those phone calls. Nothing aggravates a customer more if you don't return that phone.
Now, is this the same phone number that's on that banner at the kids' baseball?
That banner's no longer there. Okay. But, because basically they'll say, well, I saw your sign in the field, and they'll call and they'll do this. And I'm getting to think, I just thought one day, I said, I don't think anybody's going to look out in that field and see my sign and call me for a house. So that number is just fine.
Yeah, but what they will notice is your logo, because that's some of the stuff that people remember. Is they remember shapes and icons and colors, so that when they do give you a Google or something like that, and it's like, oh, I remember this is the same person, because it was this color or that icon.
Like I said, I've been very fortunate, and I'm proud of what we've done, what we've accomplished. And I keep saying we. Like I said, I'm not a good delegator, but there, for example, I meet a lot of people, and they'll say, "Oh, you're Chuck Foushee. I've heard your name, but I've never met you." Stuff of this nature. I've won some awards. Probably the one that means the most to me is the Bobby Whitehead for award that I received, in recognition for achievement in building. But the other thing about building that, if we with this is, you're building a structure that, God forbid, fire or a tornado or wind or otherwise flood, is that structure is going to be there long after I'm gone. And it just amazes me when I drive by and look. And if I see somebody, when I drive by a house we built 20 years ago, if I see something that needs to be done, I'll call them too.
All right, that's a wrap for this conversation. If you know someone who should be on this podcast, send us an email at info@meridianpursuit.com and nominate them. We're always looking for great stories to share. And if you got something out of this episode, please leave us a quick review on the show. And if you're watching on YouTube, tap like and subscribe so we can share this with more people. I'm Jesse Sampley. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next one.